10 cows were at it again. Same patch. Third day in a row. James Whitmore crouched near the fence, arms resting on his knees, watching the cattle he'd inherited scratch at the dirt like something was calling them. Their ribs poked through patchy hides, sickly. They barely touched food. Barely drank water, but they dug. And they meant it. Vet had told him sick cows usually looked for shade, not a hole. But these ones didn't follow the rules. 3 weeks ago the letter came. Yellowed edges, signed by a lawyer. Said his uncle, Jeremiah Whitmore, left him 10 head of cattle and 40 acres of stubborn land, where the county map faded to nothing. James figured he'd get a leg up. A shot at restarting life. Instead, he got walking bones with hollow eyes and a thing for digging in circles. He stood in the morning haze and counted again. Still 10. Still digging. The hole was 3 feet deep now, all carved by hooves and snouts. They worked in shifts. One would fall from exhaustion. Another stepped in. They wore a perfect ring into the earth, smooth as river stone. Folks in town had already labeled him cursed. Bad crops, broken marriage, half-finished dreams. Now even his inheritance seemed to mock him. Wyatt McGraw, who practically owned the county, had laughed in his face when James first mentioned the cows. That's what rich men do when poor men talk. But James paid attention. The cows only dug when the sun was directly overhead. Never during storms. When rain came, they huddled by the barn like they feared the water. Strangest of all? They dug in perfect formation, each cow working its own slice of the circle. Like they were following blueprints only they could see. Yesterday, James had tried blocking the spot with planks. All night, the cows moaned, pressed against the wood, groaning like their lives depended on it. By morning, they'd carved grooves deep enough to bleed. He tore the boards down before they hurt themselves. Only one person didn't treat him like a joke. County vet Lara Monroe. She'd looked them over twice and left more confused than when she came. They showed signs of poisoning, but no poison she could name. Blood work was off too. Mineral deficiencies that didn't make sense. Not for cows feeding on decent grass. The odd part, they looked better after digging. Like the act itself healed them. James scuffed at the dirt with his boot. Something caught the light, just beneath the surface. He knelt, brushed it with careful fingers, felt warm, smooth, dark, like river stone, but no river ever touched this land. As he lifted it, the cows froze. First time in 3 days, all of them staring at him, ears forward like they'd heard feed buckets. Then it crumbled. The thing turned to ash in his palm. Grey dust scattered with the wind, left a metallic taste in his mouth, and a slow burn crawling up his hands. The cows went back to digging, faster now, frantic, like he'd just flipped a switch inside them. James wiped his hands on his pants, but the burning didn't stop. Whatever that was, it wasn't natural. And judging by how the cows acted, they knew what was buried out here. By noon, Wyatt McGraw rode in uninvited. Big man on a shiny stallion. No permission, no care. He stopped by the hole, eyeing it like something foul. Gold pocket watch gleaming in the sun. Heard you got stuck with Jeremiah's rejects, Wyatt said. Didn't bother to get off the horse. Town's got bets on how long till you put 'em down. James didn't answer. Didn't feel like sharing what he'd seen. They just need real care, he said. Wyatt laughed and pointed at the hole. That's not sick, that's suicidal. When cows dig like that, they're chasing minerals their guts can't process. Means the soil's contaminated. Poison's slow, but it kills. James felt a chill. Made sense now. The sickness. The digging. Even that strange fragment. But then, why hadn't Uncle Jeremiah said anything? Why leave him land that could kill? You looking to sell? Wyatt asked. I'll give you a fair price for the land. The cows aren't worth the bullets, but that dirt connects to my west border. James watched Wyatt's face closely, trying to read past the smooth words. The offer was generous, sir. Too generous for a piece of dirt everyone else called worthless. What makes my 40 acres so valuable to you? James asked. Water rights, Wyatt replied without missing a beat, but James knew better. The old creek that once ran through the southern edge hadn't held water in years. Just a dried-out trench now. Wyatt was lying. Which meant he knew something about this land James didn't. After Wyatt left, James went back to the cattle. The hole had grown wider, more organized. They weren't just digging now. They were carving. The sickest one, a ragged Holstein missing patches of hair, had dug deeper than the rest. When she finally backed away, panting, James caught sight of something in the hole's center, bigger than the fragments. Solid. It shimmered in the sunlight, but not like metal. This thing reflected in shifting patterns that stung James's eyes. He leaned closer, squinting, then heard hooves fast. 3 riders cutting across his land at full gallop, heading straight for the hole. Even from a distance, James could tell they weren't drifters. Well-kept saddles, heavy bags, long guns. These men came with purpose. They pulled up 20 yards out. The man in front, silver hair, calm eyes, swung off his horse, slow and careful, palms out. "Morning," he called. "I'm Samuel Granger. These are my associates, Mr. Kane and Mr. Voss. We represent certain business interests in the territory." James didn't move from the fence post. His rifle leaned right beside it. "This is private land," Granger smiled like he expected the challenge. "Sure is. But we're here about your inheritance. More specifically, what your uncle left behind." James flinched. They knew something. Either they'd been watching his land, or they knew about Jeremiah long before the man died. The cows kept working behind him. Like none of this mattered. "My uncle left me cattle and dirt," James said. "That's all." Kane, the younger one, pointed toward the hole. "Your livestock says otherwise. Cows don't dig without a reason, not unless they're drawn to something." James flexed his hands. That strange burning had returned, right where he'd touched that first fragment. What kind of something? Granger exchanged looks with the others before answering. "Your uncle worked with the Territorial Mining Commission 20 years back. He documented mineral deposits, mapped groundwater sources. But sometimes he found things he wasn't supposed to. It explained the cattle. It even explained the digging. But it opened other questions. Why hadn't Jeremiah warned him? And why were these men only showing up now?" James studied their faces, looking for a tell. "What kind of things?" he asked again. Voss spoke this time. "Low and steady. The kind some folks prefer to keep buried. The kind that stir up trouble if they come to light." Just then the Holstein cow stumbled back, too worn out to keep digging. Now James could see it, clear as day. A rectangular object tucked into the earth like a hidden chest. Wrapped in something dark, maybe oiled canvas, protected from moisture, from time. Granger followed his eyes and nodded slightly. "We're prepared to offer you real money, Mr. Whitmore, more than a decade's worth of ranching. For whatever's found here, the pieces were falling into place. Wyatt wanted the land. These men wanted what was beneath it, and his dying cattle. They were trying to unearth something powerful folks had worked hard to bury." James stepped back. "I'll need time to think." Granger gave a courteous nod, but his smile didn't touch his eyes. "Of course, but don't take too long. Others know about this place, and not all of them are as reasonable as we are." They mounted up and rode off, but not toward the hills, toward town. James knew what that meant. They'd be talking, asking questions, lining things up behind closed doors. Soon enough, the cows would finish what they started. And whatever Jeremiah buried 2 decades ago would finally see daylight. James waited till sundown, then walked to the hole with a shovel in hand. The cattle had retreated to the barn for the night, finally giving James a clear path to the hole. The rectangular object was almost fully visible now. Its oiled canvas wrapping, somehow intact after all these years, still clung tightly. James had just begun brushing away loose soil when hoofbeats echoed again. Lara Monroe rode in fast, her medical bag strapped tight. Concern plain on her face. "Saw Granger and his men in town," she said, swinging down. "They were asking questions about you. And about your uncle. Figured you might need a friendly face." James nodded. He trusted her. Lara wasn't after money. She cared about the animals. And maybe him too. "What kind of questions?" he asked, setting his shovel aside. Jeremiah's work with the Mining Commission. What he might have found before he died. Whether you'd uncovered anything strange out here. She looked at the hole. "I'm guessing the answer's yes." Together they crouched near the exposed object. The canvas was thick, professionally sealed, tied with rope that hadn't rotted. Whatever was inside had been meant to stay safe from time, water, and curious hands. "Your cattle look better today," Lara said, checking one's gums and eyes. "Color's stronger. Breathing's normal. It's like digging's been healing them." James had noticed the same. Every foot deeper they dug, the cows looked a little less like ghosts. Not healthy. "Foot trying." "Granger said my uncle found things he wasn't supposed to," James muttered. "Things folks wanted buried for good," Lara nodded, running her fingers across the canvas. If Jeremiah documented something illegal, bad maps, bad minerals, someone might have paid to keep that hidden. They worked side by side, brushing soil away. Then James felt it again, that burn, same as before, hot in his palms. The canvas gave slightly under his touch, revealing a corner of something beneath, leather, worn, shaped like a portfolio or case. "James," Lara said softly, "look at your hands." He held them up in the last bit of sunlight. Dark stains marked his skin. Faint but spreading. He hadn't seen them minutes earlier. "The soil's contaminated," Lara said, voice low. "That's what made the cattle sick. They've been eating whatever's leaching out of this." Before James could answer, the sound of hooves came again, louder, faster. Not slow like Granger's men, urgent, and this time, James saw weapons, rifles. He turned toward the barn. "Get to the house," he told Lara, reaching for his own gun. But as the riders came into view, he froze. He knew them, Wyatt McGraw in the lead, flanked by 4 of his ranch hands, all of them armed, none of them looking to talk. They weren't planning to leave empty-handed. James could feel it. Whatever was buried here wasn't just valuable. It was dangerous. Wyatt dismounted with that same smug confidence he wore everywhere. His men spread out in a half-circle, rifles lowered, but not for long. The message was clear. "Cooperate or lose everything." "Evening, James," Wyatt called. Voice a syrupy fake. "Heard you've had company today. Thought I'd stop by and see what's got everyone stirred up." James kept his rifle close, but didn't raise it. "Still private land, Wyatt." Wyatt nodded. "Sure is. But that hole your cows dug, that ain't private anymore." "Word gets around," he pointed toward the site. "Granger's been talking. Says you found something that don't belong to you." Lara stepped closer, clutching her medical bag. "The cattle got sick from what's in that ground," she said. "Whatever's buried here, it's been poisoning them for years." Wyatt's tone shifted. "Poisoned with what?" he snapped. James crouched by the hole. He peeled back a corner of the canvas, careful now. The leather case inside was real. It opened just enough to show bundles of papers, bound in string, sealed with wax. Even in low light, James saw stamps. Territorial seals. He picked up the top sheet. "Looks like official survey records," he said. "Mining commission reports. Signed by Jeremiah Whitmore." Wyatt's face went pale. Those records were supposed to be destroyed 20 years ago. That one line told James everything. These weren't random documents Jeremiah had buried. They were official reports meant to vanish, but Jeremiah hadn't burned them. He'd buried them. James untied the string carefully, his hands still burning faintly. The first paper inside was a survey, detailed maps of underground water across the county, marked with flow rates and depth. The next, a mineral assessment. James scanned the page, his voice low but steady. "This says your western pastures have been poisoning livestock for decades. Runoff from an upstream mine. The government ordered cleanup. And relocation." Wyatt shook his head. "That's impossible." But his voice cracked. "There's more," James said, flipping through bills of sale. "Land bought cheap. Land known to be contaminated. Records of sick cattle sold across county lines. Receipts. Payments made to officials to keep it all buried." Lara stepped closer, her voice tight. "These are federal crimes. Selling diseased cattle, bribing officials, hiding contamination." James pulled another sheet, a large detailed map. It showed the contamination plume stretching far past Wyatt's property, across half the county, into water supplies for 3 towns. For a moment no one spoke. Then Wyatt made a sharp motion with his hand. His men raised their rifles in sync. "Those papers don't exist," Wyatt said. "Jeremiah was a drunk. Told stories for silver." James didn't flinch. "Then why show up armed?" Wyatt's mask cracked. "Because rumors ruin reputations, even false ones. And I've spent too long building this county to let a nobody tear it all down over old lies." But as he spoke, James caught movement in the dark. Lanterns, more riders, coming in slow from all sides, forming a ring of light around the property, and these weren't Wyatt's men. James spotted the grey mare first, Sheriff Coleman's. Then came county commissioners, a territorial judge, and a few ranchers James recognized, owners of land that shared borders with Wyatt's. Sheriff Coleman dismounted. "Lower your weapons," he said calmly. "This ain't a standoff. It's a legal matter now." Wyatt's confidence drained fast. He looked around, too many witnesses. Word had spread. Faster than fire in dry grass. Now half the county's leadership was standing on James's land. Judge Harrison, sharp-eyed behind wire spectacles, stepped forward. "I hear you've uncovered documents of territorial interest, Mr. Whitmore." James didn't hesitate. He handed over the portfolio. "Mining commission reports," he said, "filed by my uncle. They document contamination, cover-ups, and illegal livestock sales." The judge read the top pages by lantern light. His face hardened with each one. Commissioner Blake read over his shoulder, growing pale. His ranch sat downstream from Wyatt's. "These levels should have triggered federal response," Blake said. "Why weren't these reports sent to the Capitol?" Sheriff Coleman already had his warrant book in hand, because someone paid to bury them. He held up a page. $5,000 to Supervisor Marcus Webb, to declare the reports lost. Gasps spread through the crowd. Webb had retired rich, bought himself a mansion in the Capitol, said it was investments. Now it looked like hush money. "Judge," someone called, "how many cattle were sold from those poisoned lands?" Lara stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "According to these manifests, over 2,000 head in just the first 5 years. Silence except for the wind. And the cattle, breathing softly in the barn behind them. The cattle had been sold as far off as Kansas and Colorado. The weight of it hit hard. Contaminated beef had crossed territorial lines, served at dinner tables hundreds of miles away. Families had eaten poison without ever knowing. This wasn't just about bad soil anymore. This was a criminal conspiracy, wide, deliberate, and long-running. Ranchers stepped forward one by one, eyes scanning the documents. They found their own land markings on the contamination maps. Land they'd blamed for failed harvests, sick herds, lost income. Now they knew better. They'd been lied to for 20 years. "My children drank from that creek for years," whispered Tom Bradley. "My wife died from something the doctors never figured out." Wyatt had started backing toward his horse, looking for an escape. But Sheriff Coleman was faster. He stepped in, firm hand on Wyatt's shoulder. "You're not going anywhere," the sheriff said. "Not till we find out how a rancher on regular income bought half the county." By dawn, the truth had shaken the whole region, just not in the way anyone expected. 3 weeks later, James stood outside the county courthouse. He watched as federal marshals escorted Wyatt McGraw into a prison wagon. The man who once held court over half the county now wore shackles, and the hollow look of someone who'd lost everything. His lands were being seized by the territorial government. Evidence in a case that now spanned multiple jurisdictions. Judge Harrison had wasted no time. Within days of the discovery, federal agents arrived armed with warrants, combing through bank records, deeds, and hidden ledgers. What they uncovered was worse than anyone imagined. The corruption ran deep. It wasn't just Wyatt and Marcus Webb, 3 county commissioners, 2 bank presidents, and a federal inspector who'd falsified environmental reports for nearly a decade. The poisoned cattle operation had earned over $200,000 in illegal profits. Money laundered through land deals, equipment companies, and livestock auctions to keep the trail cold. Samuel Granger and his men vanished the morning after the documents surfaced. Riding hard toward the Capitol with saddlebags full and eyes over their shoulders, Sheriff Coleman wired warnings to every lawman within 200 miles. But Granger knew how to disappear when the tide turned. The human cost was still being counted. Dr. Matthews, the Territorial Health Commissioner, came with a medical team. Their job: investigate illnesses tied to the contaminated beef. Early reports linked dozens of unexplained deaths to heavy metal poisoning. Tom Bradley wept when federal doctors confirmed it. His wife had died slow, mercury poisoning never diagnosed, a death that might have been prevented if Jeremiah's reports hadn't been buried 2 decades earlier. But the most staggering truth came from the financial probe. Every dollar of Wyatt McGraw's empire, every acre, every head of cattle, had come from poisoned land and silenced records. His entire fortune was stripped, piece by piece. Declared criminal proceeds, subject to federal seizure. James, who had once been the subject of gossip and pity, found himself in a role he never imagined. The primary witness in what the territorial newspapers were calling the crime of the century. He'd turned down offers, bribes, from Granger's people. He stood firm when it counted, and for that, the ranching community called him a hero. The land would take years to heal, but the government set up a compensation fund. Built from Wyatt's seized assets, it would help honest ranchers rebuild on clean ground, with clean water. 6 months after the truth came out, James stood in his pasture. The same 10 cattle grazed quietly nearby, but this time they were healthy. The grass beneath their hooves had been brought in from clean territory. The land was no longer cursed. It was healing just like everything else, and for the first time in a long while, James Whitmore felt something like peace. The federal cleanup crew had removed 18 inches of poisoned topsoil and replaced it with healthy earth, paid for entirely through the seized assets of Wyatt McGrath James's cattle were thriving now, putting on weight by the day. Their coats had turned thick, glossy, and clean as the heavy metals finally worked their way out of their systems. The county commissioners, in a unanimous vote, had appointed James to head the newly created Environmental Protection Board. It wasn't just a title. It came with real authority and real respect. His first order of business: mandatory soil testing on all ranch land county-wide. No more secrets. No more families suffering like the Bradleys had. Lara Monroe had accepted his proposal the month before. She kept her vet practice, of course, made it clear she would. James liked it that way. He respected her fire, trusted her judgment. They made a good team. Together, they had plans to turn the new ranch into a model for the whole region, one built on clean land, honest work, and environmental stewardship. The federal government had purchased James's original 40 acres at a premium. They were converting it into a research site to study long-term contamination effects. With the sale and the reward he received for uncovering the conspiracy, James bought new land, clean land. He now ran the largest cattle operation in the county. As for Samuel Granger and his men, they were caught near the Colorado line. Saddlebags full of stolen reports and gold enough to retire twice over. Now they sat behind bars in the territorial capital, awaiting trial on federal conspiracy charges. Marcus Webb, the former territorial supervisor, wasn't so bold. He was found dead in his study, left a note confessing to 20 years of bribes and lies, but he took the names of his allies to the grave. The scandal had transformed James, from the man folks used to whisper about, to the man they turned to for advice. Ranchers asked his opinion on land. Officials consulted him on policy. Eastern newspapers called him the cowboy who told the truth. He'd been offered hush money, real sums, but he chose honesty, and that choice had changed everything. Still, it wasn't the recognition that brought James the most peace. It was the simple things. His cattle were strong, his pastures clean. Neighbors nodded when they passed, not with pity but with respect, and Lara, she loved him for who he was, not for what he owned. That evening, James stood quietly at the edge of the field, the same pasture where 10 sick cows once clawed at the earth in desperation. Now, the hole was gone, filled in. In its place, a small stone marker. It bore no grand speech, just a few words etched in iron: for those who paid the price of silence. Tomorrow, he'd marry Lara Monroe in the county's largest church, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and the land he'd helped heal, and for once, the future looked wide open. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now for another true tale from the frontier, where courage and justice meet in ways you never expect. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or send a super chat to help us keep these stories coming. Your support keeps the fire burning.